When you are not in it for the deal, when you are actually in it to understand the motivation of the buyer, what they are staking in terms of their reputation within the organization, and if you can get really aligned with their goals and help them accomplish that, then it was not just the deal you're winning the relationship over a very long period of time. That insight has helped me and shaped my thinking and my decision making for multiple decades now.
Welcome back to the Meg and Amy Show. Thank you so much for the support for our show. Please do like and subscribe and add comments. We would love to hear from you and what you'd like to see more of on the show. Today, we're talking with Yamini Rangan, CEO of HubSpot, about inventing the AI-first operating model. Yamini has spent over 25 years scaling some of the biggest names in enterprise software, from SAP to Workday to Dropbox, before joining HubSpot as their first Chief Customer Officer and then becoming CEO in 2021. In January 2023, Yamini made one of the boldest moves we've seen in enterprise software. She completely scrapped HubSpot's roadmap and rebuilt the entire company around AI-first principles. The result? A $40 billion company that's redefining how marketing, sales, and customer success actually work in the age of AI. Named one of the most influential women in business and best CEO for women, Yamini is literally writing the playbook for what it means to lead transformation when the rules of business are changing in real time. Welcome, Yamini.
So great to be here, Amy and Meg. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you. I'm so excited. Oh my goodness. And in preparing this podcast, I got a wealth of information about your incredible background, Yamini. So I thought maybe we could start there. We have tons to talk about today. So first off, I understand that as a child, you read every book in your local library. Is that right? Tell us more about your early childhood.
Oh my God, you're starting with the nerdy me. Yes, totally. Especially during summer vacations, while people had like all kinds of other hobbies outside, I was literally this bookworm. I was at home and I'd go to the library, pick up like 10 books and literally was reading one book a day, I think. And I even was so lazy, I would not leave the house. So I would give my mom the list of next 10 books to pick. And so one time she came back, and this was after many years, of course, but she came back and she said, "The librarian said that you've read every book in the library. Your name is on every back cover." And I was like, "Oh, we need to move to a different town."
I was going to say, yeah, time to move. Yeah.
What was your favorite book?
I was like particularly into Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, like that whole genre of, something to uncover. And, my whole thing reading the book was like, can I uncover before, I got to that, right? Like it was like, can I guess it? Can I figure it out? And it was like this whole thing about that genre I absolutely loved, and it still continues. It's all like leadership is a lot about uncovering something before, someone else makes it obvious to you. So,
And of course, this was in a small town in India, and you had very supportive parents as well, right? So
Absolutely. My mom, I grew up in the 80s, and my mom really raised me and my sister. I have an elder sister who's 2 years older, and she raised us to have big dreams. And it didn't fit the place that we were growing up. It didn't fit the societal expectations of us, but I felt like she had a very different expectation of us in the house. Later on, I had to reconcile between the societal expectations and what I had been raised. But we had big dreams. We had like big conversations. It was always about, what are you going to do when you grow up? Are you going to become a lawyer or an engineer or a doctor? She preferred that I became a doctor, but I didn't, concede with that plan. But yeah, it was always big dreams, and how to get to those big dreams that, you can like work towards something that was big, motivating, and inspiring.
And you moved to the US for business school, is that right?
No, I actually moved for master's in engineering. So
Oh,
I
gotcha.
grew up in India, small town. We did end up moving, not because of the library, but because we didn't have a high school that went all the way up to 12th. And so my mom moved, and I went to a bigger city with a better library and a high school, which was in English and English medium school. And then I finished high school and went to undergrad in electronics engineering back then. And then as soon as I got done, and even before I got done, I was like, I want to do master's. So I came here originally for master's in computer engineering. I got that in Clemson, South Carolina. And then I started my career as a infrastructure engineer. And this was like the late 90s. There was just this thing called the internet boom. We were building, a lot of like capacity router switches. And that was my first job, is actually infrastructure engineering. And I did that for a few years. And then I was kind of not happy being in the data center, and I wanted to like talk to people and really understand the value of technology. So I went to business school in Berkeley, and then started my career in the go-to-market side of technology after that.
You said that coming to the US was both terrifying and defining.
It was exciting, terrifying, defining all at the same time. The good news was that my mom had always talked about, oh, you're going to go to the US and you're going to get like a higher education and you're going to make your life there. And so there was just a part of the expectation that she had set for both me and my sister. So we had talked about this for almost a decade. In dinner table conversations about going. So I knew that was kind of something that I wanted. But at the same time, I grew up in a small town, and my parents were fantastic. They supported us. They gave us, everything in that little cocoon life. And here I was, one-way ticket, and a trip where I got to Atlanta. That's the airport that I got to, and I was like, yeah, someone from the school will come and pick me up. And I waited for like 4 or 5 hours, and then they finally came and grabbed a bunch of us who had just like came in. And I was like, yeah, someone is going to come. It was like terrifying moment of waiting in the airport, hoping that I had like literally made a name card. And I was like, randomly walking around with this name card, hoping that someone didn't miss me. And so it's part exciting and part terrifying, and then trying to figure out a whole new system and a whole way of life from the language. And even though I'd studied in English, I found the accent to be very different, and then trying to contribute and trying to understand the societal norms and expectations, and being in a college and doing like part-time work so I could pay off for my grad school. All of that was terrifying, and the defining parts were honestly the very different expectations. Like in India, as a student in engineering, and especially as a female student in engineering, you kind of like you wanted to be under the radar. You literally didn't open, and pretty much I felt like I was on mute. And anytime I tried to contribute, there would be some snickering remarks about this woman who is an engineer who was trying to do something. So I tried to be on mute. And I think it was literally the opposite in the first year in a master's degree here. Half of my class were 50% participation. And I was like, wait, I got to unmute myself and I need to learn how to like contribute. And then I didn't get that right for the first, few quarters, and then trying to figure it out. And then, being an engineer, even when I first got my job and I moved to the Bay Area in 1996, and I was the only female engineer. How was I still am trying to figure out the societal expectations, but I'm also trying to figure out what is my place in a room where I'm the only one that looked like me. And so, yeah, there was just a lot of like figuring things out. But, you then fall back on some defining first principles. I wanted to be authentic to who I was. I had to find my voice. Not in a I want to participate to earn points way, but I need to contribute in a certain way. How was I going to stand out? I mean, I have to say that in late 90s and even through the 2000s, I worked twice as hard as everybody else. I don't know if I would recommend that path for leaders now and women that are trying to set their mark, but that was the only path that I knew, that I was like, I'm just going to be better than everybody else. I had to work harder than anybody else, and I had to have answers faster. And so that was at least the initial playbook. And those were all defining decisions of how you're going to navigate your career, but also your life in a very different environment.
There's so much to love about that story. So I just want to sort of unwind and go back to the waiting 5 hours for someone to pick you up. Just reminding all of our youngsters listening about how much the world involved waiting in the era of pre-cell phones everywhere, and how much you really were reliant on trusting someone to follow through on what they said, and how that really does, it defies my own recollection sometimes. I sometimes sit there and think, how did that work, right? I met up with people in another country once, like how did we find each other? How did we make, plans that really stuck and didn't have us just accidentally missing each other?
That was pre-internet.
Right.
That was like, the early forms of ARPANET and
Yeah, there was like the hint of email.
Hint of email only in campuses if there was like a very clear LAN connection with an Ethernet cable that was wired.
Maybe inside the computer lab somewhere, but certainly not with you when you're waiting at the airport or whatever.
I wrote a letter to someone and I said, this is the day, this is the time. Here's the shirt I'd be wearing, and I'd carry my name. Please come find me. And they wrote me a letter back saying, okay. And I got that letter, and I had the letter and I had my name, and, we got business done.
Yeah. I wonder if like the whole, 10 years leading up to this, it became such a fantasy, and then you're like hit with reality, right? Like, I mean, I wonder if that almost made it more stark, prepared in a way, but also like kind of disillusioned.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I'd say that it was still thrilling and exciting. Even the wait was thrilling and exciting. I was just like people watching and learning, and, and you're right, the 10-year dinner table conversations were all, what is typical of a first-gen immigrant? That is kind of what you do. You dream of a better place and dream of a better education and dream of a better opportunity, and it is pretty exciting. And I still love like my whole journey. Parts of it was really, really hard and much more difficult than I expected, but the whole of it is still like super exciting. I would do it all over again,
Yeah,
Meg is a bit of an economic immigrant, so.
Yes. Well, and also first to go to college. So in a similar way, the other part I was reflecting in your story was the kind of inception of your family, that like you guys are going to go to the United States and you're going to go to college and you're going to go do big things. And how structurally that impacts us. And so thinking about that both in my own life and raising children, and just understanding how core those messages become, and then how they change over time. Because to your point, like they wanted you to be a doctor, and you decided, no, I'm going to be an engineer, and then, oh no, I'm going to ultimately become a CEO, which I'm sure was a emotional roller coaster for them, because they probably didn't have as much experience with that. And I think all of those pieces, to your point about immigrant experience or an experience of doing something that's not been done before, develops both resilience and grit, but also a set of tools for navigating the unknown, which I think is the piece that is so useful in my own life, and I can see it in yours, in feeling both comfortable and ready for this moment that we're experiencing right now. Because we're in a moment where no one knows. And most people are like, oh my God, I've always known. I've always seen a pattern. I've always had somebody to follow. And, in my experiences are sort of like, well, I went to a place and I started paying attention like more than most people. And I just did my best to find my way through. And eventually that worked. So, yeah,
I
I think
could not agree with you more. I think this moment certainly calls for it, but when you've navigated that path, you begin to trust yourself even when you have no answers, in that level of grit and that level of like trying to figure it out. It helps in almost every path within your life.
Yeah, someday I will write a book about the benefit of being an outsider, the fact, the tools that you really gather in that process. And to your point, not easy, man. You take some pretty serious punches to the gut.
Just equally as amazing as you two, I immigrated from New York to California.
Probably a tougher immigration.
And it took me like years to convince people that buffalo wings were from Buffalo, which is where I grew up. So I had my hardships as well.
Very important life moments. Although Amy was born with grit, so I don't know, she didn't need hardship to develop it, man.
Oh yeah, when I first met Amy in 2011, when we were both at Workday, I was like, I want to be like Amy when I grow up.
Don't we all?
The poise, the clarity of communication, and just the ability to command respect in the room. I was like, yeah, I want to be like her.
Oh, what a sweet thing to say. Thank you.
Oh,
I'm
true thing
blushing.
to say, Amy.
One of your core components, Yamini, is like how customer centric you are. And I mean, and that was really ingrained in me from PeopleSoft and very much Workday. And I wonder if that was the same for you. But I saw this quote about like how you see things, and that like sales is not about closing a deal, but it's really about getting your customer promoted.
Yes.
I love that so much. So yeah, tell us like, how did you like build this philosophy?
I mean, so the decade before I got to Workday, after I'd graduated from business school, I was at Siebel and SAP. And when I joined Siebel, I joined the go-to-market organization. They were creating this new function called value-based selling. Now we have like value engineers and value-based sales, and everybody knows this. But back then, it was just kind of getting newly created. And over that decade, I spent a lot of time in that function across multiple companies. And I got to talk to customers over and over again. Sometimes when they were prospects, sometimes, post value. So we were going to try to get like value realization studies done. And in like hundreds of those conversations, I got like very curious. Like on one hand, they became a bit predictable. And I would sometimes, I was traveling a lot Monday through Thursday talking to customers, and I would sometimes get confused which customer I was like with, because it would sound very similar to the conversation that I had the previous week or the previous month. And so, I was like, okay, this is a pattern. The reason I feel this way is because there's a pattern. And what are the patterns that I'm beginning to hear that's not related to that particular deal or winning that particular cycle? What are the patterns? And the patterns were much more interesting to me than the deal. And the patterns were, everybody in the roles that we were talking to, they were trying to bet on technology to do something bigger for them and their organization. And everybody had some kind of goal that was not just that project or signing a deal or something. It was a goal that they wanted to accomplish that would certainly help their companies, but that would also get them promoted. And they were putting their name, their reputation, their career on the line, sometimes to make these really big decisions. And that pattern became like so much more interesting for me to observe, that when you are not in it for the deal, when you are actually in it to understand the motivation of the buyer, what they are staking in terms of their reputation within the organization. And if you can get really aligned with their goals and help them accomplish that, then it was not just the deal you're winning the relationship over a very long period of time. And that was kind of like what I learned through hundreds of these conversations, and that was super interesting. And that's been like this core tenet. I still carry that pattern of not winning the deal, but actually helping people in their careers, and that makes for a much better relationship. So it's paid. That insight has helped me and shaped my thinking and my decision making for multiple decades now.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, that it's all about making the customer the hero of the story, and giving them a reason to take the value that you want to give them. It's beautiful.
I think the thing that is especially insightful in that, and I always share that same point of view. In fact, I almost use exactly that language this week with a advisory client. But the thing that I think you're bringing forward that even is most important in that is it's not just the intentionality, but it's also the sincerity of it. You can see a lot of people that take the idea, but don't really mean it, right? That they don't feel it in their bones, that they're in it with the customer, and the customer's success is everything in what they've put forward to them as a solution, and then how they stay with them until that value of the solution is realized.
Yeah.
And I think that in this moment, we are going to see a lot more evidence of the difference in those two approaches. People that signal that they're interested in the customer's success and promotion, versus people that actually are willing to do the work to make that happen. Steve Goldberg actually calls this the ascension test, and he looks at it as a test of the software development process and the product process. Is your product built to make that happen? And I think that's just another corollary to the sales process as well. Are you selling with that as your definition of success, and are you building with that as your definition of success? And I think if you just keep those top of mind, you create a place that will set you up for long-term success.
Yeah, I'd not heard of ascension test. I'm going to go and read up on that, but I think the concept is definitely the same thing. And there's a longer arc for everything. It's not the initial buy or the initial value of the product. It's the longer arc. So I like that a lot.
All right, so let's fast forward a little bit to 2021. You're at HubSpot and there's an accident. Tell us more. What happened?
Yeah, actually, I'll rewind a little bit. I joined HubSpot January 2020, and
great timing.
timing. Little did I know, and it was like first year, and actually the first couple of months I was going through my onboarding, and I had conversations with Brian, who was at that time our CEO, who was the co-founder of the company, and he was like, don't rush in your onboarding. Just keep it slow and easy. And I was like going through it. And then he calls me March first week and he's like, go now. Like, I need a plan in 5 days. And we are going to go and talk to the board. And we all know what happened. I think like March, everybody saw like this massive upheaval in the world, across humanity. Like we were all trying to figure out what are we going to do with our lives. But in business context, it was also everybody in small, medium businesses just going out of business, really quickly and changing the way we operate. And so I do think that that first year was very foundational because we made a bunch of changes. And, think about this whole like customer centric approach that we were talking about. That was my reason to operate the way I did. But when we got to this point of customers have so much uncertainty. They have no idea what they're going to do, how their businesses are going to operate, and how they're going to even continue given what humanity was going through. For us, it became like super easy. You could have given me one day, I'd have said the same thing, which is like give a lot of customer value. So we cut the prices of the product. We moved a lot of our features into free. We gave value. We created a fund for customers. We said, we're just going to help them in the time of need. And at some point, maybe it'll pay off. But it was not about the payoff. It was like doing the right thing when there was so much uncertainty. Fast forward to end of 2020, Brian was like, okay, if something happens, if I get hit by a bus, then you're on my succession plan. And we had like a very short conversation about that. And then March 2021 happened, and unfortunately, Brian did meet with a snowmobile accident, and he called me from his hospital bed, and he said, I need to recover. And of course, we were like, of course you have to recover. And he said, just step up, run, and don't screw anything up. Come back. I was like, okay, great plan. I'll not screw anything up till you come back. And I literally had like a list of when Brian comes back. Like, here are like 20 things that he needs to fix. I can offer to fix. I can help him. And there was a when Brian comes back list, which was pretty long. And then he did come back. He's fully recovered. He's doing great. But he did come back in August, and he said, okay, you're doing a good job. We want you to continue to do that. And yeah.
So he looked at your list and said, yeah, no, you got
you can do that. Yeah.
Well, I know. I was like, okay, the list is long here. But I think Brian was like very convincing. And I also think that these are moments that as any human being, but certainly as women leaders, there's just a lot of questioning. Am I ready? Have I done all of this? Have I checked my box in everything that was on my list that I could actually do a reasonable job of that? And we just go into these moments of questioning if I can do everything on that list, given I didn't, have the experience of doing everything on the list. And those are one of those moments where I've now come to realize that in points like that, there's no point looking at your past to predict the future. You literally have to go to the future, create the future you want, and then take actions to get to the future. So I changed my perspective and, came out of that period saying I could sit here, question myself, question the shoes I was filling and all of that, or I could define what I wanted to do in the next few years and how I was going to go about doing it. And so that's the working backwards principle. Everybody in the industry has talked about it, but it worked really well for me. And I still do like a 3-year plan every year where I look 3 years into the future and what would I want that would give me the deepest level of fulfillment, at work and in life to have accomplished, and then set out taking actions to get to that point.
What were the conversations you had with the board at that time in helping you feel both comfortable that they had your back and were ready to support you, and what they were going to expect of you with that switch?
Yeah, I literally called up Lori Norrington, who is now, an awesome mentor for me, is the chair of our board right now. At that time, she was an independent chair. And literally the conversation after I talked to Brian was, Lori, tell me everything. Tell me how you all came to this decision. The good, the bad, the ugly. I want to know it all. And I want to know what you think before I even give my answer. And, you have to have people who will tell you the truth. And Lori is one of those mentors for me where she will tell me the truth. And she was like, yeah, these are the conversations. This is why we have confidence. These are the areas that we think you still need to prove. And here's how I will, support you in that process. And I think that gave me just a lot of confidence. And I felt that, both from Lori as well as the board across the many years. And we've had to navigate a lot. Of course, 2020 and 2021 were just, post-pandemic, and it was just crazy. But we've had to navigate that, and then we've had to navigate a bit of a downturn macroeconomically where most companies, including HubSpot, had to do layoffs. And then we had to navigate AI. And when you do all of that, you need to know that there are strong supporters for you, that you can have open, honest conversations, and you have the trust that they will tell you the truth.
I'm curious about something. You said that Brian had talked to you and said, "You're my successor." How do you think you became the successor? Like what is it that, you talked earlier about how you would always work twice as hard. And then of course you have this amazing philosophy. Like, what is it that set you up to be the CEO's successor?
It's a great question. I'll have to go to Brian, ask him for the answer of why he thought so and the board thought so. But maybe the simplistic thing is that I've learned in my career, you have to first solve for the customer, and then you have to solve for the company. Like, no politics, no self-preservation, no self-interest can show up. That's how you become a leader. I think over the years I've connected the dots across teams. So it was, not the fact that we were navigating through, this pandemic, but it was like, how do you connect the different dots? How do you make decisive moves that you can bet, your career and, your team on to get things accomplished? And how do you do it where it's just not for your self-interest or how you're going to show up in your career? You're doing it because it's the right thing for the company. I bet if I asked, and I will go ask Brian, if I asked, he'd probably say that I focused on the customer and I focused on the company, and that built a level of trust. And certainly the fact that we focused on the customer and we made a bunch of moves in 2020, like we said, and second half of 2020, all of those moves paid off. The goodwill that we had generated with customers actually showed up with customers coming back to us and saying, we trust you to help us navigate. We are going to now, for the first time, have a digital sales team or a digital marketing team. And they came back and trusted. And so I think part of the results of the moves that we made in 2020 probably also added to the confidence. Comes back to the customer.
And it also comes back to being authentic and actually showing up and consistently doing the work.
Right.
Yeah, like if you had not playing politics.
Exactly. If you had just said, oh, it's customer, but your actions were not aligned with that, you would not have been as credible to the board, because they would see.
That's right. I think you said this earlier, Meg, which I want to go to. Some of these are fashionable to say during some parts of your career, but really it comes down to the sincerity and authenticity with which you execute over a period of time that people can count on you for that. It has to show up. You can't just use fashionable words. Now I'm talking about customer centricity, and 2 years later, you go and talk about something else that is fashionable at that time. It doesn't work that way. You just have to, walk the walk in your career.
Well, the other thing that I detect as well is that Brian sounds like a very authentic person as well, and that he was able to see that and appreciate it, right?
Absolutely.
So that's huge.
I wouldn't be here without his support and without Dharmesh's support, the co-founders and the board, and they saw something, and I still work hard not to let them down.
All right. So making big moves and making good decisions and following your heart and your instincts. So now let's go to 2023, when you made your big AI pivot, right? So the little bit I know is that you had this big moment where you just said, okay, we are changing our entire company strategy. Go. What did you do? How did this work? Tell us more.
I'll tell you my aha moment. But when I said go, nobody went. So we'll also talk about
We've heard that before.
Let me also say, when I said go, no one went. So there was a lot of change management that is still ongoing. We can talk about that because that is part of the transformation. I mean, look, I think November 2022 was pretty big. Like if we've been in the industry for such a long time, and I actually have this like this distinct, memory, like where my husband and I were going for some kind of like a holiday party, first week of December, and for 2 hours we couldn't stop talking about anything except ChatGPT, and like we were like obsessed, and I think we missed a turn, or like we were driving randomly and like we didn't even get to the party on time because we were like talking, we were like, oh my god, this thing is big. And anybody who's been in the industry, you can see a big shift. And for me it was like a lot, like the possibility of what you can begin to do to drive customer value was just like mind boggling to even imagine. And so I do think I had a personal moment in December, and it begins with that like gut instinct that this thing is big. And then, we came into the year, and like every company with every year, we had gone through a planning process. We had like a nice plan. We came into the year, we had the plan, we got the plan approved, and then we were like, doesn't matter. We just have to like make a big change. And by the time we got to our board meeting in March, we were like, this thing needs to change. The product roadmap needs to change, or what we deliver as features and core functionality needs to change. And we have to start thinking about the company and how we begin to go on this journey. But I'll tell you, like that, I remember like bringing our product leaders, the co-founders were there in the room, so the five of us were in the room, and we're like, we have to change. And we looked at each other and we're like, okay. And then we went back to the company, and everybody was like skeptical. They were like, yeah, this is like every other tech cycle. You name everything in the last 10 years that was supposed to be the next big thing, and that wasn't the next big thing. They're like, yeah, it's like that, right? And so I think part of it was like, no, the first 6 months it was trying to convince people that we're not after the next shiny object, and there is something fundamentally transformative about AI, and we had to like convince ourselves that it was going to be that. And so part of the reason why that internal transformation was important for us, and we started that back in 2023, is like we need to gain conviction. We can see what this technology can potentially do, but you have to have so much conviction that it will add value before you can go and convince hundreds and thousands of customers to do the same thing. So one of the things we did is we started really transforming the product roadmap with features that we wanted to release that year, and it became a AI bet year for the product. But we also started internal projects and initiatives, and we basically said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Let's just go and like try and use this technology to make changes in marketing, or make changes in support and sales and even coding internally. And I would say the first year was like super slow. Change is hard.
How did you decide what projects to take on then? Like, how did you prioritize and everything?
We didn't.
1,000 flowers.
Yeah, we didn't. I mean, we didn't. And honestly, it's sometimes okay to not. And I remember in the first year, we said, no memos, just experiments. Like, I don't want anyone to write a memo and get the memo approved and like come up with a strategic. And we said, no memos, just go build and go experiment. And at that time, it was like chaotic, right? Like it's very chaotic in an organization, which, there are some believers, some naysayers, and many, bystanders. Like you have the spectrum of everybody. And then you're like, just go build. And I would say that I would do the way we did it again, even though it was like super chaotic, because how are you going to, in a new technology, in a completely different S-curve, where people have so many questions and we have very few answers that are certain, how are you going to like come up with a strategy to build, or say, here are places to go and start? We said, let 1,000 experiments bloom, and people came up with ideas. And in fact, there was a spreadsheet in the first year that had 153 rows of ideas, everybody thinking that this one was going to be the big bet. And we organized into smaller groups, across those bets. And we said, here's a big bet in support, here's a big bet in sales, and here are some big bets in marketing. But I also think that you begin to recognize in the first year which leaders are adopting it and living it. And in our case, we had, in the first 6 months, we had like a handful of leaders that were living, breathing, and just existing in a new world. And they were learning really quickly. They came up with, ideas. They had conviction in certain paths. They pivoted, some other paths. So it was like very chaotic. But there are like a handful of leaders, at HubSpot that I learn from every day because of how quickly they're moving and experimenting. And you just have to bet on those people. You just have to give them a lot more opportunity to just go at it. And I would say that that was important in year one. And then, there's still change management is the biggest, question. Like, how do you take a company through this? And then how do you, convince people this is the right approach? And the answer is you don't. Like, you understand the fears. There are fears about roles. People in year one were like, they remember the hype in 2023 of like, you're going to have $1 billion company with one agent or 10 agents. All this kind of, hype.
Well, some of that's still happening. I mean,
That's still
it's still being said today. Yeah.
It's just bizarre to me that, we're still saying things like that. That only adds to the fear of the people that need to go through change. And, so you're trying to lead when there's so much hype, there's so much fear, there's so much uncertainty, and you still want like fast action. So how do you do that? I think the thing that I've learned is to be authentic. Like many times in the last 3 years, I've said, I don't have answers. In fact, we cannot all have certain answers. We're going to learn as a team. We're going to run experiments. We're going to build hypotheses, and we're going to say we were wrong in the hypothesis or right in the hypothesis and keep learning and going. So I think that stating the fear of job replacement and basically saying I don't have clear answers, but I know one thing: if we stand still and debate, we will lose. Stating that fear and kind of like trying to address that head on helps. I think finding change agents within the organization that are learning at a faster pace and giving them the freedom to explore a lot faster and teach the new methods helps. And also making it completely okay to be wrong and giving the ability for people to say I was wrong here, but I learned something, and making that culturally okay helps. And those are the things that we started doing and we're still in the process of doing. And I feel like we've come a long way to help people like talk about the fear and talk about the uncertainty and talk about not having the answers, but learning as a team and innovating as a team. And that's been part of the process of in transforming ourselves into operating very differently, building a very different product, and having a completely different go-to-market.
So having two big thoughts, obviously such a great correlation to our discussion around the book Blind Spotting and that intersection of intellectual humility and, being comfortable with explaining what you don't know and working together with the team to figure it out. But you wrote something a few months ago that has been top of mind for me for a while. And it gets to this point of just how, life-changing it is, those people who run forward into uncertainty as opposed to back away and create both an example, they trailblaze for others, but also share what they've learned. And what you wrote was, in the AI era, careers won't be built on a span of control, they'll be built on innovation density. And you really are describing people who have that innovation density. And I agree with you completely that when we used to talk about 10x talent, I think we had a different shape. But to me, in this AI era, this is what a 10x talent really is. And I think our systems and structures are a little behind on both how we identify, how we reward, how we recruit for and build this type of skill, the kind of skill that amplifies everything around them and isn't necessarily just about having a very large team that does, things that we used to do or whatever. How did you get to that thinking, and what do you think it's going to take for it to be more clear to others that the evidence of seniority is not tied to org size?
Yeah, I think in the first year, the process that I described, right, where we had a handful of leaders within the organization that they were getting hands on, and they were using the technology, they were using AI, and they were like, this is working, this is not working. Here's something I tried, here's something that I didn't try. And the results from those types of leaders and their teams was actually 10x. And the results from the ones that are like, let me wait, let me get certainty, I'm going to wait to see if this is the latest fad within tech. I mean, obviously they had like nothing to show. And so I think like, you when you let 1,000 flowers bloom, it causes a bit of chaos, but then the ones that are actually going to be sustained blooming versus the ones that will die. Now taking that metaphor a little too much there. But I think like that actually taught us something. And that taught us that the 10x results were not coming from people that had a very large team size, but they were innovating at a different pace, but much more importantly, learning at a much, much faster pace. And so I think that was like one of the insights, one of the things I do is like always Thanksgiving look back on the year and like, what did I actually learn as a leader? What patterns, are new that I had not seen before. And interestingly, like that is a pattern that was like new coming out of 2023, that it was not the team size, it was actually the level of innovation that you were able to drive within the team. And so I think that over the last couple of years, we've talked internally at HubSpot about this mindset shift. And there's still a lot of uncertainty about careers and growth opportunities and promotions and all of this. And I keep telling people that I don't know, I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you that if you're not using AI, you're not on the path, right? Like it's almost as simple as like, I don't have all the answers of the exact role, and are we going to have a new role called forward deployed engineers? I don't know. Like, there are other roles that will come up, go to market engineers, prompt engineers were in fashion for about like 2 quarters. Like, I mean, all these things. But I know that you have to be innovating and you have to have this learners and explorer mindset. And so the question that you asked, Meg, is a really good one. How do you build this into the DNA of the system itself? And how does this actually transform a company's operation? It's one thing for someone like me to recognize a leader who is innovative. How do we hire? And you have to change the profile of how we hire. And part of it was like getting our chief people officer, and she was on this journey with all of us, and she's like changed who we hire. And we look for innovators with growth mindset that can be agile. And then how do we change the promotion criteria to not be of team size and rather innovation density? How do we do that? How do we like reward people that are operating in this new way? And how do we celebrate and showcase and make it like high status to really be experimenting? How do we change all of that? It requires the system to change, and that takes time. I think we're in the process of doing it in different places. It is very structural in nature. It has to go and flow through the entire employee journey, but it also needs like time to like go through a couple of cycles. But people, I would say, now recognize that you have to have this type of experimental learner's mindset in order to grow, at HubSpot and outside HubSpot.
Now, what has been the role of the board in all of this, in terms of the AI transformation, in terms of the expectations that they have of you and the team and results and so on?
It's like this is the boardroom conversation. There's not been a single quarter since November 2022 where we've not talked about AI. So, and I think it's the same thing with every boardroom, public or private, where the conversation is, what are we doing? How quickly are we moving? Which parts are transforming well, and which ones are not? And so, I think that rightfully so, this is a big moment for all kinds of organizations, certainly for public companies like us. And so, every single board meeting, we've had deep dives on our AI strategy. And I think that what is also important is that our board is also a learning board, and they like to learn, and they're always going out there, and they're, parts of the board meeting are, to get the board members to come and share what did they learn, what was the new observation or insight that they've had. And we go as far as to actually getting hands-on with with use cases, and we try, of course, our own software, but also the new types of AI native software that's coming. We're hands-on. We got the board to be hands-on. They're hands-on with us. And there was actually a board meeting a couple of quarters ago where we literally spent a couple of hours on testing out different use cases, and then having a deeper conversation on what has changed, what has not changed, and what are the new patterns that are coming. And so I think learning and evolving is really, really important across the board.
That is so good. So we're going to run out of time, but I have one last line of questioning. I want to come back to your true center.
Oh, we're going to keep going a little bit, Meg.
I know.
Have the whole how marketing and sales is changing.
That's where I'm headed, Amy.
All right. Let's go.
I want to go to your core center, which is about your customer centricity and how you think about what's happening for your customers in their lives, and what does it mean for them to get promoted.
Yeah.
And I think one of the functions that is most disrupted, of course, is this middle place for marketing,
yes,
which are, the conversations I'm sure you're having every day. And I saw some really good stuff coming out of your conference.
yes,
and some really amazing thought leadership that you brought forward. But I really kind of want to understand, what have you learned from your customers? What's top of mind for them? And how are their needs changing in a way that is something that you're thinking about in serving them better?
I mean, look, you just said it. Marketing is going through the biggest transformation it has seen in the past couple of decades. And it's quite simple. Internet made information searchable, right? That was the easiest way to describe it. And so people searched. Buyers searched for information, and sellers made it their playbook to be found in those searches. As simple as that. But now that is changing pretty dramatically, where AI overviews are giving answers, and customers are not searching, they want an answer that is well backed, well researched, and well thought out. They're not looking for information, they're looking for answers. That's a fundamental shift that impacts almost every playbook, every tactic that we've had within marketing. And our thought process is this: on one, yes, it is going to impact your top of the funnel. And if you had a playbook that you had honed in for the last decade on how to be found in the top 5 blue links of a search, and how to get that person to click and get to your website, and how to capture their email and then nurture, and if you'd perfected that art, sorry, that specific playbook is just not going to work. It doesn't mean content is not going to work. Content still is important. It doesn't mean that your customers are not looking for answers. They still are looking for answers, but your playbook needs to be different. And we think that the playbook actually has 3 parts to it. And the first one is that you cannot wait for someone to come to your website. You have to be where your customers are, and they are now in very different places. They are on YouTube, they are on TikTok, they are on Insta, they are on Reddit, they are listening to podcasts, they're looking at email newsletters. So they're everywhere except your website, which means you need to be everywhere with the most relevant content where your customers are. So that's part of the playbook. The second part, while everybody is blaming kind of like AI and AI overviews has disrupted search and disrupted, marketing, I think that the other part of it is AI is actually driven a level of personalization in terms of reaching out to your customer that is unprecedented. It is like never been seen, where I could, based on even like your patterns of what you are listening to without even you visiting our website, if you're on G2 or you're on Reddit or you're looking at certain kinds of content, I now have the ability to kind of like pull all of that intent together and send you something that feels like I'm talking to you. And that is the superpower of AI, which can help personalize and make that information relevant on a one-on-one basis. That superpower is also going to change marketing. So the first is be where your customers are. Second is use AI to get personal messages. And third, which is super nascent, is AEO, or answer engine optimization. When we said that people are no longer searching for information, but they're looking for answers. They're looking for answers in LLMs. And you need to be in that answer. How can you be in an answer if you have generic content? You cannot. So your content needs to get specific. And the average LLM is 23-word long question. The average search was 5 words long, right? So it basically shows that someone's not looking for a nice red jacket. They're looking for a red jacket with this beautiful collar and like a zip that is, rust in nature that goes with this. Yeah, they're looking for something super specific. And in order to get to that, your content needs to be that specific, and you want to be part of the answer. It's the same thing with B2B. And so I think that is the playbook and what is shifting within marketing, which means that, we need to help our customers. Every day I talk to CMOs and CFOs and CMOs and CROs, and this is the conversation we're having.
I saw when you were on LinkedIn, you were talking about AEO versus SEO, and SEO was about keywords and volume, and SEO was about quotation sources, and you said conversions. So what do you mean by conversions in this frame?
SEO was a volume game. Like you want to get as many people to click on the blue links so they get to your website. And we all in marketing and go-to-market obsessed about website traffic for a decade. Right now, it's not about website traffic. It's not about how many people you get onto your website. It is how you show up in social or podcasts or email or, an LLM, and how you convert. And the conversion, is what is the game. It's not about volume and the conversion. But think about even AEO, which is answer engine optimization. Do you show up in a very specific question that your customer or prospect is asking? And here's what we found. Because they are asking a super specific question, and because they are deep in their research, their ability to act or the intent is really high. And we've found that if you can show up in that answer, the conversion of those leads are 3x better. 3x better. Like, I mean, in the world of marketing, we've never seen this for a long time. We would do a lot of things to conversion and get 100 basis points improvement, right? Like we would do a lot to get very small movements in conversion. Conversion of LLM leads is 3 times better than any other lead because of the level of intent. And so I think the game, that's what I mean by the game is different. It's not like optimizing for how many people come to your website. It is optimizing for, can you convert them with email personalization, with more specific answers, with being exactly where they are at the time that they need something. Can you convert better? And if you can, then that is the playbook for you.
So to the conversion side of the workflow, and excuse my ignorance, it's been a while since I've been in the marketing sort of chain, But is there a practical way? How are marketers today going from, oh, I did a search in an LLM, you did a great job in bringing content so that the LLM returned your product as one of the ones to choose. How good are they in the next redirect? Because I know they're still just trying to open up the shopping one on the consumer side, but what is the B2B? Because, the activation before used to be, to your point, go to a website, grab their email, and then you can, engage with them further. How do you direct them when there's, they got their answer?
Yeah, it's still citations and links. And,
I see.
we've seen like two things work. One is when you show up in an answer, and you'll see this in LLM, you'll have like this little citation link.
Yeah,
And when
yeah.
you click that, it'll tell you what the
Go
source
to
is.
where it found the answer. Got
Exactly.
it.
That is the simplest example. The more fundamentally different example is that in the case of HubSpot, we have deep connectors with OpenAI, with Claude, Anthropic, and Gemini. So we have deep connectors, and so when someone is searching for, let's say, a mid-market CRM that can help you drive better marketing leads for a manufacturing company that is based in Ohio, like if someone is searching for that, the HubSpot like deep connector link within that LLM actually lights up, and when you click that, there's a nicer experience back into our product, directly into the
Love
product.
that.
And that is a new way. So there is like a link into back to your website and content, but you can also create like pathways from, LLM outputs and answers into your product that makes that even more alive. So I think there are multiple ways, but this one is nascent, right? Like the volumes are not as high. It's not even close to the SEO and search volume, but given how quickly things are moving in the industry, I'm not a big predict some big thing person, but at least all the predictions I've looked at, the traffic from AEO searches are going to surpass SEO by 2028. So it's not that far away that we have to get our playbooks kind of completely revamped to get ready for that.
I'm surprised it's that long, actually. I would think it's like next year.
Well, it's just
I
because
think
SEO is so good. I mean,
I
it's
think
so
it's
powerful.
going to go faster. I just looked at a stat last week which said that 8 out of 10 AI overviews and Google searches, actually, 8 out of 10 Google searches result in no click, which means AI overviews and AI mode
Yeah.
have both gotten so much better that 8 out of 10 result in no click. I mean, that is massive change within the industry, which means that people are also going to rely a lot more on AEO in terms of getting to the answer. So my thing is that if I were to see like everything within AI is going faster than we can imagine. So I think this is one area which is probably going to move faster than we currently think.
The fact that you guys have already sort of built in a way to turn that into a productive activation, because I think that is going to be the difference between a lot of people better informed and a lot of people taking action. So very cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're experimenting, learning, moving fast, and it's just fascinating. For me, I get excited about how much we can help our customers with this change, right? Part of our job is to help small and medium businesses grow. And when the industry is changing this rapidly, and when that change is actually resulting in compression within marketing, and we have a playbook and we have abilities to like experiment and learn and help our educate our customers, that is exciting. That's what I get super excited to wake up and do.
Okay, so for our leadership corner today, Yamini had put out a note to her community weeks ago asking, what is it that you're curious about with regards to leadership and AI? So I thought maybe we could take one of those.
Sounds good.
What mindset shifts do leaders need to make during times of huge change?
First of all, mindset shift is the most important thing, right? Like it is like leadership in a time like where we are navigating with AI does not start with anything except mindset shift. The question becomes like, what is the mindset that we want to have? And here's my simple answer. If we were map readers and the mindset that we had was, here's path A, here's, destination, and here's like a nice path that we can like, trace and get to, you have to give that up. And you have to have an explorer's mindset. And an explorer does not know the destination, does not even know which direction that they need to head, but they will explore, they will stay close to the ground, they will experiment with different paths and different avenues, and they will carve out something completely new. They thrive in not knowing the answer. The map reader thrives in knowing the answer. And that is the mindset shift. If you can embrace not knowing the answer, in fact, thriving in not knowing the answer and finding ways to get to the answer and carving out a path, then you can navigate this and probably anything else that comes in your life.
Again, just tying this back to the book Blind Spotting that we were talking about earlier, it's just perfect. So Dr. Ferguson refers to it as knowers versus seekers.
Oh,
so instead of explorers, seekers, but same exact principles. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
I love it.
So first off, I think it needs to be the Amy and Yamini show because this is amazing. So what I love about your response, Yamini, and obviously I agree with everything you said, is you didn't just talk about it, but earlier you actually modeled what that looks like and how you're doing that. So that I find super powerful for anybody that's trying to find that confidence in themselves. The only thing I would add, so I completely agree that the era of leadership of knowing is gone, that pretending that is actually a very big tell. And I think that everyone really feels that and is having their own responses to how comfortable they are with acknowledging it. But the truth is, the sooner that we give up the need to be the knowers, the all knowers, and have our experience be the only tool that we use, I think is like, we have to let that go. And then I think to your other point about explorer mindset, I also believe that it's in that opening up to the possibilities of the multiple futures and opening up to the collective wisdom of a group of people navigating together versus an individual leader having all of the answers. And I also think your comments earlier about, learning agility and how critical it is for all of us to recognize that the only way that we really provide true leadership is for us to be willing to do the hard work of learning for ourselves and doing that again in a collective way as opposed to an individualized way, because it is going to be impossible for any one of us to know what to do next. But I truly do believe that the group of us together can find a path forward. And I think the path that we will find will be way more interesting and way more powerful than the one we would have experienced if we just stayed in our traditional playbooks.
Another tie back to your leadership approach and this book, Blind Spotting, was when you were thinking about taking the CEO position and you went and sought disagreement potentially, right? You went to the board and you wanted to know, like, why shouldn't I do this? Why is this a bad idea? What did you say about me, right? You weren't looking for people to just pump you up and say, oh, you'll be great, Yamini. Go for it. You'll be wonderful. You wanted to know, like, what was the real shit? what was the real scoop, right? And that was something that that Kirsten talked about as well, is like how important as a leader to not believe your own, that you are just a flower of beautiful smells, right? That your
Totally.
shit stinks. And
Yes.
why does it stink, right? So, well done, Yamini. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you do. And you also need to have people who will tell you the truth,
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's what I give Meg a truth bomb every day. Yeah.
She does. She does.
I try to keep
Very,
her grounded.
it's yeah, across
I
everything.
need the two of you in my life every day. Keep me grounded. Tell me the
Well, now that we know
truth.
your guys are close to each other, we'll have to meet up in real life and
We'll have to do this.
yes. Well, thank you so much. I know we've been stalking you for quite a while, trying to navigate your very busy calendar. So we really are grateful for you joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. I feel like you gave me a lot to think about. So I know you gave our listeners a lot to think about as well.
Thank you. It was such a delightful conversation. I honestly could keep doing this for a long time, but I'm sure nobody wants
You actually have a day job.
zapping me. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's invent the future together, everybody. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.